Cosplay is for everyone is a phrase that people say all the time in the community, but let's be real, a lot of people don't really mean it. What they say doesn't match what they actually mean. That cosplay is for white, able-bodied, and conventionally attractive people. This mindset can be seen through subtle and not so subtle cues alike, from not including a diverse group of people in their niche or their communities to outright posting hateful comments. It's everywhere. A huge issue in the cosplay community is ableism, yet it doesn't get as much attention as other issues, so I've observed. Today, I'm going to be doing a Q&A with one of my cosplay friends, Em, who has a disability and is here to lead the conversation about their challenges and their cosplay journey through a Q&A format. Before we get started, hi, my name is Ezra Faye. I'm a professional makeup artist, a cosplayer, and I feel like this is going to be a great way to hear from other cosplayers and not just me for a change. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Em.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Em Wild. I have been cosplaying for about 15 years. I actually have a degree in it. I actually studied costume technologies in college. I love the fact that cosplay allows people to really connect to characters that they really love and also allows them to kind of escape into a world of fiction for a little while. And one of the things that I really try to do as a cosplayer, particularly now, is to raise awareness and visibility for the disabled members of the cosplay community.
So what made you interested in cosplay and what was your first cosplay?
So I was introduced to cosplay while I was involved in community theater. I started being a costume technician for a bunch of productions that we were doing in this community theater, and I really found my niche there from a young age. And a friend of mine once said, "Hey, did you know that these people like make their own costumes and go to these events and all of this different stuff?" And I had actually just started reading manga and watching anime at this time in my life, and so I was very intrigued by that whole side of it. But then I was also like a massive nerd in terms of Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and Star Trek and all of that, and so I was very pulled in by a lot of different aspects of it. My first cosplay was actually Toph Beifong from Avatar: The Last Airbender. She was always one of my favorite characters from that franchise. That franchise kind of obsessed me as a kid, and I just really loved it. And I think that it's very interesting because Toph Beifong is blind. She is disabled, and I think that it kind of came full circle for me, the fact that she was my first cosplay, and then also I now use my platform in order to kind of raise the visibility of disabled cosplayers. I think that's kind of cool.
So this question's a little deeper, but you've only had your disability for a few years, if I'm right. Can you tell us about kind of what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So about 2 years ago, I was working at a Build-A-Bear, and I absolutely loved working at that Build-A-Bear. It was great. I loved the job, but working retail can be really tiring, and working with children in particular. And so I was driving home one day after a long shift, and I ended up falling asleep about a minute from my house. And I ended up waking up while I was driving off the road into a ditch, and I ended up breaking my back in 8 separate places. So I was rushed to the hospital, and I was in surgery for several hours, and a couple days later I learned the full extent of my injuries. I had a spinal cord injury that resulted in paraplegia, and I was told that I was never going to be walking again. And that was a huge moment in my life, a huge turning point. For the last 2 years, I have been, learning how to live my best life with that as a part of it.
What was it like coming back to cosplay after this incident? Did you find that your disability impacted the way that you created cosplays or went to conventions or anything like that?
I think that coming back to cosplay after the accident was almost like an act of defiance. It was kind of like an act of rebellion for me because I was told by so many people what I wouldn't be able to do and what I couldn't do anymore. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm still going to do this. Still going to do this big thing that is so important to me that I absolutely love. And so as soon as I was like physically cleared to start traveling, I went out of state for an anime convention and I started cosplaying again. And I was so excited to get back into it. But the thing is, as soon as I started to like bring on new projects, I realized that we do use our legs for like every single thing that we do when we build things for our cosplays, from making patterns to cutting things out to sewing with a sewing sewing machine that like has a foot pedal. Think about sewing and you don't think about needing to use your feet, but if you're using a sewing machine with a foot pedal, you need the foot pedal to work. And so I have to like use adaptive technology and adaptive methods in a lot of really kind of crazy ways in order to make all of that work.
What are some common stereotypes or challenges that you faced as a disabled cosplayer? And these can be either online or in person convention spaces.
One of the biggest stereotypes that I have run into as a disabled cosplayer is simply the fact that people think that we don't exist. People are really surprised when they hear that I'm a disabled cosplayer. They're really surprised to hear that disabled cosplayers are a thing and that we are here and that we want to be involved and participate and actually go to events and stuff like that. They seem to think that like if we do exist, we want to like stay in our houses in our cosplays and do nothing. People just assume that like we aren't going to be there at the events doing the things and being involved. That's one of the main things that I've been pushing against by trying to bring the best caliber work that I can forward and do things like compete and do the karaoke, be involved in panels and stuff like that, so that there is as much visibility as possible, so that other people in wheelchairs or using other mobility aids who come to these conventions can see like, hey, there are other people who look like me who are doing these things and are participating, and maybe I can do that too. But also so that the able-bodied people in those spaces can see, hey, the people who are using mobility aids and stuff like that want to be involved. And then the secondary stereotype that I have often seen both online and in those con spaces is that people seem to think that the work that disabled people put into their cosplays is naturally going to be of a lower caliber than any able-bodied person, and that is just factually inaccurate. Disabled people are perfectly capable of pulling out fabulous costumes just like able-bodied people are, and I think that that's a really important thing for people to realize.
Do you ever feel excluded in the cosplay community because of your disability?
I'm going to answer that in like a micro level and a macro level. So in a micro level, no, I don't think I've ever felt like truly excluded in the cosplay community. And I think that that is very much by design. And the reason I say that is because I have really surrounded myself with people who are very empathetic, who are very considerate, and who are very like aware of people in general. I think I've been very lucky to talk with people who are also very on the level with that. On a macro level, yes, absolutely, I've felt excluded because there is oftentimes a lack of accessibility, particularly when it comes to competition and like showcases and stuff like that, stuff where you have to be up on stage because of the lack of ramping. And that is one huge thing that I know that I'll bring up several times during the course of this whole conversation is the lack of ramping.
What is accessibility like at cons? What are some things that are generally done right, and what are some things that could really use improvement?
Accessibility is really off and on. It's kind of spotty at most conventions that I've been to. There's some cons where they have really great disability services set up from the get-go. Like there are tables right when you enter, right when you get your registration and everything, where you can go and you can like get a badge that says like, hey, I need accommodation. And they talk with their volunteers about those accommodations so they know what's going on. They have their ramps all up and they have all of that set up. It's great. Whereas at some other cons, it's really an afterthought. They may say, oh, well, maybe you can skip a line here and there. That's not a one size fits all solution for all disabilities. It's just not a perfect system for the spectrum of needs.
So, if I'm being honest, I see a lot of advocacy for cosplayers of different races. I also see a lot of advocacy for cosplayers of different sexualities and gender expressions. I can't say that I've seen as much advocacy for disabled cosplayers. Do you think that there's a reason why?
The reason I think that you haven't seen as much advocacy about disability in cosplay is because it's hard to have a voice at the table when you can't physically get to the table to have your say. And that is one of the biggest things, is that there are so many events that take place in inaccessible spaces that the cosplayers and the con goers that want to be involved and want to have a voice in those conversations can't physically get to the places where they would have those conversations. And they aren't involved in the decision making. It's one of those things where when it comes to like race or body type, all kinds of other different advocacies within the cosplay community, people can advocate for themselves much more easily because they're able to get into those spaces. They're able to really raise their voice for it. It's really up to the allies of the disabled people to help push for those changes, because the disabled people are not only not able to get into those buildings, not only are they not able to get into those conversations and into those decision making spaces, but they're also working with limited energy and limited resources. And that makes it very difficult to fight for change. Yeah, we want to be involved and we want to be included and we want to participate and we want to be involved, but like it's very difficult to fight for that when we're also very tired all the time and we have 110 other things that we're also fighting for in our lives.
What needs to be improved in the cosplay community to make it a genuinely more inclusive place for disabled cosplayers?
I think two of the most important things that the cosplay community can do to make themselves more accessible to the disabled community are, first and foremost, care that the disabled community is part of the cosplay community. And when I say care, I mean, if you're running a cosplay event, don't make us an afterthought. Make sure that the space that you're running your event in is accessible. Make sure that the stage that's for your competition is also accessible. Make sure that your karaoke space is also accessible. This, that, and the other. Make sure that those spaces are not just able to get into the room, but also able to participate and able to be involved. Because we want to be there. And we also want to be part of the planning. We also want to be part of the organization. We want to be part of all of it. But in order for that to happen, we need to be able to get there. And then the other one is really just to be understanding with us when we need accommodation. I know that there are a lot of times when people who need accommodation for their disabilities, it causes something to be slower or it causes something to be a little bit inconvenient. I know that cosplayers in the cosplay community can sometimes be a little bit hesitant to be understanding of that kind of inconvenience. But I feel like it's really important to remember that like disabled people are people too, and we have just as much right to be in this community as anybody else and to be having fun with everybody else as anybody else.
What advice would you like to share with other disabled cosplayers?
Well, I think my biggest advice would probably just be to do it. It's time to start asking yourself, like, why not instead of why? I think there are a lot of people with disabilities who think that they can't do something when they absolutely can, and they just don't know how to do it yet. And I would love to provide resources and stuff like that for disabled people in the future who want to learn how to sew adaptively and learn to make their own stuff. But even if you don't want to make your own stuff, even if you want to buy it or alter it or get it commissioned or however you want to do it, all you got to do is do it. I feel like as soon as you start, you're never going to want to stop. I feel like it's one of those things where as soon as you get into it, you're going to love it. Genuinely, the community in general is very accepting. Even if there are some hangups with accessibility, the general vibe is immaculate. I have always been really appreciative of the cosplay community for being as accepting as it is and has been to me. There are going to be mistakes, there are going to be setbacks, there are going to be slow days, there are going to be flares, there are going to be all kinds of things that make you, like want to second guess getting into it. But really, you just gotta do it. As soon as you start, you will love it and you will not want to stop. And anybody who is feeling discouraged because they're in the middle of one of those things, I would say there is always, always, always light at the end of that tunnel. There is always going to be another character that you want to see yourself being, and there's always going to be another show that you're obsessed with, that you see a character and you're like, oh my goodness, I relate to them so much, or oh my goodness, I love their design so much, and oh my goodness, all of that cycle is always going to draw us back in. I think that's part of the beauty of cosplay, is the fact that like it's a perpetuating like beautiful cycle of love and appreciation of art.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me about this. This was really great. This was really helpful, and I'm sure everybody else is going to love this as well.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it so very much. Thank you. Bye.
After the interview, I did end up thinking of an additional question. I ended up asking Em to write a statement instead of having to film more, but I wanted to hear their thoughts about able-bodied people who want to cosplay disabled characters. So this is their quote. I personally believe that cosplay is for everyone, but there are some cosplay choices that can be harmful. I feel this way about race, culture, religion, and definitely also about disability. I think that when people cosplayed as disabled people, particularly characters with mobility aids, they are walking a very fine line, and their conduct needs to reflect their actual ability, not the ability of the character that they are portraying. For example, if you are cosplaying as someone with a cane, not a gentleman's cane, but a medical one, do not mimic an unusual walk or limp while using it. And if someone offers you an accommodation based on your cane, make them aware that it is just a prop and allow them to rescind that accommodation if they want or need to. Wheelchairs are particularly tricky, and I generally say that if you have other options, go with those and leave the wheelchair cosplays alone unless you're a wheelchair user. The reason why is because using a mobility aid when you don't need one makes our challenges into your accessories, and that's a really terrible feeling. My disability isn't a costume. I can't step out of the chair when I'm done with it or when it hinders me. It is me. And so I say cosplay is for everyone, but be aware of how your choices affect others around you, especially those who already have to fight harder to be seen in this community. I think Em said it great here, and there is nothing that I could possibly add to this. If you have any disability of any kind and you are a cosplayer, I would love to hear about your experience. Whether it's cosplaying online or going to conventions or whatever it is, I would love to hear more about it so that we can all get further educated, because I feel like a lot of people just don't know, and I don't feel like that's an excuse. So feel free to let me know what you think. I would love to hear from you guys on this topic, and of course, make sure that you like and subscribe so that you can become one of Ezra's faves, where I talk about cosplay and conventions and other things as well. Make sure that you go follow Em on Instagram as well and check out their stuff. And I'm gonna go because my phone ran out of storage in the middle of filming and I need to go clear up more storage. Okay, bye!